Good evening. It's been a busy day for rescue services around the country, but for one Wellington yacht crew at least, it could have been worse. The 12-metre Spencer-designed Aztec, with its crew of 7, was 12 hours out of Wellington competing in the annual Boxing Day race to Gisborne when it hit something in heavy seas and sank.
When the yacht set off on the Gisborne race yesterday, there was little sign of what was to come. Aztec, seen here closest to the camera, is no stranger to the race, having entered many times before. The race was expected to take between 1.5 and 2 days, but less than 12 hours out, the fleet ran into swells of 2 to 3 metres, along with high winds. About 20 kilometres off the South Wairarapa coast, Aztec sank. 2 boats responded to Aztec's distress flares, and the crew of 7 were all picked up from a life raft. Today, in ideal sailing conditions, the crew of the ill-fated Aztec returned on one of the many boats that had withdrawn from the race. There was obvious relief at the boat harbour, but the strain on family and friends was evident.
We came off a big wave, we heard a mighty crunch, I think we hit a log. It's all a log or a hunk of driftwood or something, you know. And we filled up with water and sank. That was all it does to it. It all happened in 5 minutes. It was gone.
The life raft which sheltered the 7 crew was one of the few things salvaged from the lost boat. But there was also relief that the loss was only possessions and not lives. Skipper Brian Coleman displayed the usual yachty's philosophy.
Does an experience like this put you off this kind of racing?
Well, never put me off. Maybe give me a delay for a week or 2, but never put me off.
So far, weather has forced about half the fleet to withdraw, but the rest should all be in Gisborne by late tomorrow. Spiro Anastasio for the Network News.
Meanwhile, there have been at least 38 rescues nationwide and 1 fatality. An Auckland woman died when she fell from a cliff in Christchurch, while 34 people were rescued from Canterbury surf beaches. 2 people nearly drowned in Auckland and 2 were rescued after climbing accidents. Police say the prisoner who died in a blaze at Paremaremo prison last night started the fire himself. While the fire was brief, 21 other inmates had to be evacuated from their cells.
The fire broke out just after 10 o'clock last night and was all over in 10 minutes. But it left 1 inmate dead and a dozen treated for smoke inhalation at the prison hospital. The local fire service was called out but wasn't needed as prison staff got the situation under control. The fire started in a cell in C block, similar to this one. The dead man, Hikitangi Tumoana Brown, used an accelerant to set fire to his mattress and died from smoke inhalation. Police are treating his death as suicide. Brown had been sentenced to life imprisonment in 1986. Prison staff say he'd caused no problems and they had no warning of his intentions.
Certainly it's been very, very quiet in C block, and this has just come out of the blue.
Was there any particular gang makeup in C block?
No.
There has been some conflict among inmates in C block in recent days, but prison authorities describe this as nothing unusual, and they say the dead man was not involved. It's the first suicide in the jail for more than a year, and it's being treated as an isolated incident. Anita McNaught for the Network News.
Soviet authorities have now evacuated more than 100,000 survivors from the earthquake-devastated region of Armenia. On Christmas Day, another 3,500 successfully completed the exodus. Many must now attempt to rebuild their future, with little or nothing to help them from the past.
She's about 18 months old and will never see her parents. No one knows who she is or what happened to them. They may still be under rubble in Spitak. There are 540 children in the number 3 children's hospital in Yerevan, Armenia's capital. Pavel Galajian is 12 and was a survivor when his school of 600 children collapsed in the quake. As well as appalling injuries to his jaw, Pavel suffered severe mental trauma, and doctors fear he'll be psychologically damaged for life. This ward is for children who've sustained severe facial injuries, and there are dozens of those. The physical pain may be ended by devoted nursing, but most of these children, like Narina Galustian, have lost one or both parents. That will be harder to overcome. The children in this hospital will live, and foreign doctors and nurses who rushed here to help can now leave. Are they sorry to go?
Well, yes and no. I think we can leave because I think we have done a tremendous job, and I think we have given a lot of hope and stimulating aspects to these people.
It's not an entirely sad place. Children are getting better and laughing. Some are starting to play and draw, and even go where they're not supposed to.
In the United States today, a jet with 110 people on board made an emergency landing after part of the cabin roof ripped off. The plane was more than 6 miles up when the tear suddenly appeared.
The Eastern Airlines Boeing 727 had been bound from Rochester to Atlanta. Many of the 104 passengers and 6 crew aboard considered themselves lucky to get as far as Charleston, West Virginia, alive.
I looked up and the roof panel had been sucked up against the fuselage, and the sun was shining through that side of the fuselage, and it was giving you an outline of the hole in the side of the plane.
The plane was at 31,000 feet. Passengers heard the sound of air rushing out. A piece flew away and the cabin pressure dropped dangerously. The pilot put the plane into an emergency 45-degree dive to get down to 10,000 feet where the passengers could breathe again. This turned into a life-saving move because half the oxygen masks in the plane didn't work.
The problem was that none of my children's air masks were inflating, and that was what was so frightening.
You got an intense pain in your ears where my sister was screaming, crying because it hurt so bad.
The decompression was caused by a crack in the fuselage over the rear seats in the plane. A hole 18 inches across opened up. According to the manufacturers, many of the most common aircraft have passed the halfway point in their useful commercial lives. It's the point at which metal fatigue problems start happening.
The kidnappers of 2 young French girls say they've released the children as a Christmas gesture. They've been held in Lebanon for more than a year, and tonight their whereabouts remains a mystery. The kidnappers insist that the girls have been freed, although they won't say where.
When 7-year-old Marie-Laure and her 6-year-old sister Virginie were mistakenly kidnapped in November last year by Abu Nidal, they were said to be part of a Zionist spy ring. In fact, they and their mother, who is still being held along with the baby she gave birth to in captivity, turned out to be Catholics. When it emerged they had no Israeli connections, they became an embarrassment to their captors. Earlier this week, the children's father and grandmother flew to Beirut to try and heighten public awareness of their plight and plead for their release. But the Christmas presents they took with them went undelivered. Tonight, they returned to Paris unaware of the success of their mission, to be told that 2 of Lebanon's most innocent victims had been freed.
A rebel English cricket side may be touring New Zealand this summer. Cricket officials here say a private sports management company from Britain has approached them, but any tour would have nothing to do with the international series.
It was only last week the New Zealand Cricket Council cancelled the official English tour. Today, at the beginning of the Shell Trophy, local cricketers heard they could end up playing against the English after all, but only unofficially.
Everyone's welcome to come and play cricket in New Zealand, and that's, I'm sure, always the board's stance. If they can arrange opponents and associations who want to play some cricket against a good side, I'm sure they'll be keen to come.
The official English tour was cancelled for financial reasons, after Pakistan refused to play against the English who had South African connections. The New Zealand Cricket Council says if the unofficial tour goes ahead, it won't affect the Pakistan tour.
Well, I don't think they'll be remotely interested in it, frankly. I think it's just yet another low-key tour that'll be maybe going on at the same time.
Mike Gatting's been named as the possible captain of the tour, but the calibre of any other players or who they would play in New Zealand isn't known. Sahai Tiffin for the Network News.
And still with that Shell Trophy cricket, Shell Cup champions Otago will have to improve if they want to retain their title. Auckland knocked them over in less than 2 hours at Eden Park today as the one-day series began around the country.
The Otago batsmen were in trouble from the outset. With the score at only 7, Peter Dobbs was the first to go off the bowling of paceman Stu Gillespie. Auckland's most successful bowler was Martin Snedden with 3 wickets, and here the O's were always on top, backed by some brilliant fielding, with Deepak Patel quite outstanding. Otago tried to up the rate, but when Snedden took this catch, Otago were 97 for 6 with only 20 overs left. They struggled on to reach 122 for 9. After a dull opening session, the crowd wanted action. Auckland's openers, Richard Reid and Phil Horn, obliged and set a lacklustre game alight. Reed was in great touch, but was finally out bowled for 59. Otago had its minor successes, getting Auckland's captain Jeff Crowe first ball, but the loss was inevitable, with John Bracewell hitting the final runs to give Auckland a win by 6 wickets. Ron Taylor for the Network News.
And in other matches, Central beat Northern District, scoring 217 for 7. Northern were all out for 147. Wellington beat Canterbury in the most exciting finish of the day. Chasing 158, Canterbury was all out for 145 in the 49th over. A spectacular crash nearly put race favourite Ari Vatanen out of the Paris to Dakar Motor Rally. The accident happened when the Finnish driver was racing in the prologue in Barcelona. Despite rolling and then eventually losing his door, Vatanen carried on to the end. But it was a bad day all round because he was also penalised 21 minutes for being late to start the race. But the first prize for the roly-polies must go to a baby panda that's just made its first public appearance at a Tokyo zoo. They've decided to name it Yu-Yu, partly because no one will actually know what sex he or she is for about another year.
The public of Tokyo queued for hours to see the new baby, born on June the 23rd. With its new name, Yu-Yu, it's every mother's dream of a playful youngster. So far, nobody has found out what sex Yu-Yu is, but instinct or something certainly lets it know what a good bamboo tree is. The new panda now weighs in at 10.3 kilos and stands 64 centimeters tall, and a panda's spirit of adventure knows no bounds. The mother, Huan, has had 2 babies before. Her firstborn died 2 days after birth when she accidentally crushed it. Yu-Yu is said to be the 16th panda born outside China. It's hoped that she will not be the last.
Wonderful. Now the weather prospects. For the northern half of the North Island, showers turning to more general rain, with easterly winds rising to gale force in exposed parts of Northland and Auckland, where the first effects of the tropical cyclone are expected to bring 50-knot winds and 4-metre swells. For the rest of the North Island and for Marlborough, cloud increasing, but it'll stay dry. For Canterbury, cloudy with some light rain, and for the rest of the South Island, rain developing overnight. And that's the news and sport on Tuesday. Good night.